Welcome. It is really good to be together, and I'm really excited about our teacher and our discussion this morning. First of all, I'm Micah Streifer. I think I either know or have studied with all of you in some form, and I'm thrilled to be able to gather for this half hour of Tikvah through text, of finding hope through the act of study, and also very glad to welcome back someone who has become a part of the Lost Oak family. Rabbi Leah Berkowitz has taught several classes, including classes that some of you were in, so I'm excited that we get to continue the discussion that some of us have been having with her over recent months and the last year or so. Rabbi Leah Berkowitz is the rabbi of Kol Ami in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. And Rabbi Berkowitz, high five for fellow Kol Ami rabbi.
Oh, yes.
And she also is the author of a number of children's books, including the one that I really like the title of, which is Queen Vashti's Comfy Pants. And she has a book of Midrash type stories called It Might Have Happened This Way. Is that what it's
Maybe
called?
it happened this way. I'm holding it up.
Oh, I was so close. So I'm going to invite you to join me in the blessing. Rabbi Berkowitz, do you have the blessing as part of your slides, or should I share it for?
You can share it. I don't have it.
Okay, so I'll invite you to join me in the blessing for study, and then we will jump right into our discussion. If you'd like to unmute and we can say the blessing together, you can do so now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher titanu b'mitzvot Torah. Blessed is the one whose mitzvot, whose commandments make our lives holy, and who commands us to engage in, to immerse in words of Torah. As always, please put your name and your location into the chat. And if you have thoughts, comments, questions along the way, you can either put them into the chat, or if you raise your hand electronically, then either Rabbi Berkowitz or I will see you, and we can have a discussion that way. And I'll turn things right over to Rabbi Leah Berkowitz.
Sounds good. All right, I'm just getting some of my things situated. All right, so welcome to everyone. As you probably know, if you're not already cleaning your house or cooking food or making travel arrangements, we're getting very close to Passover. And so I thought we would look today at sort of the climactic moment of the Exodus, which is the parting of the Red Sea. And I think this is a very rich text, both in the Torah and in Midrash. And there are just a lot of different ways in which people react to this moment. Oh, and I see somebody's from Germantown. Wonderful. So anyway, so we have this climactic moment where the sea parts and we walk across on dry land, and then where this is the part that's maybe a little more difficult to talk about, that the Egyptians come after them and they are drowned in the sea. So there are lots of different characters in the Torah and the Midrash doing different things. Does anybody have can anybody think of a character in the story who and what they were doing? So who are some of the characters and what were they doing when the sea parted? You can put it in the chat, or you can.
We have Miriam.
Yes, Vicky. Yes, we have Miriam. And what's Miriam doing?
Oh, well, Miriam is with her timbrels at the dancing at the end.
Okay. Yes, timbrels and dancing. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Dennis says Nachshon stepped right in, so that's a midrash.
Right.
About one person who was brave enough to go into the sea before it parted. Bob, do you want to? What were you thinking?
Moses was dithering, praying, and God told him, "Come on, get going."
Yeah. Moses was praying, and God said, why are you praying? Like, get going. And that's sort of where Nachshon steps in. All right, so we have a couple of examples of what people were doing, and some of them are from Torah, some of them are from Midrash. And I'm going to show you one of my favorites today. But first, I'm actually going to show you one that I think, given the world we're living in, I think it'd be nice to have sort of a contrast between one of the more maybe one of the more hopeful and one of the less hopeful reactions to what's going on. So you have to think this is something that is happening to people that they've never seen before in their lives, that they've gone through a lot of trauma, and that they've gone through a lot of trauma, and then they've also gone through a lot of change and transition. So, and people in those kinds of scenarios, people people have lots of different reactions because everybody's different and everybody experiences things different ways. So that's sort of what we're going to look at today. I would have loved to, if this was an hour class, I'd show you all of the different reactions, though you did cover a lot of them. But we're going to focus on one or two of them. So this one is going to be more in contrast to the one we're studying, but I had heard this as a story that was told to me at summer camp. Or actually, I think it was on a trip to Israel. And I did not realize it was an actual Midrash until a couple years ago. So I wanted to share this with you. Because I think, while some people are obviously like, everybody's witnessing a miracle, but there's always people who are skeptical, and we're going to see that. In what ways did the Israelites rebel at the Sea of Reeds? It was precisely at the moment when they went down into the seabed and found it full of mud because it was still wet from the water. There were two Israelites, Reuben and Shimon, which are sort of Tom and Harry, sort of the person A and person B of rabbinic literature. Also the oldest children of Jacob, but they would no longer have been alive at this point. There were two Israelites, Reuben and Shimon, who were among the Israelites. As they walked through the sea, all they could talk about was the mud. Reuben said, "In Egypt we had mud, and now here, too, in the sea, we have mud. In Egypt we had clay for bricks, and here, too, we have an abundance of clay to make bricks." They rebelled at the sea, even though this was the parting of the Sea of Reeds. They didn't notice the water. Instead, they saw the mud. So, wait one second. I saw oh, yes. So Bob is talking about military maneuvers. Yes. So right now, what we have in this moment is sort of maybe the not the most grateful or hopeful reaction to the sea. It's sort of like, well, how is this going to be different? But also this sense of looking down instead of looking up. And I just wanted to acknowledge that given the range of emotions that anybody has on any given day, but especially in these difficult times, that this is also a valid reaction to what was happening at the Red Sea. Here it's being labeled as a rebellion, but this is something that I'm sure we've all either said at a moment or heard somebody else say at a specific moment. And it's not here it's categorized as a rebellion, but it's kind of also a natural human response. Oh yes, Micah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this, how to articulate this. It makes me think about the power of positive thought, essentially, the power that we have to shape situations through how we think about situations. It's Viktor Frankl, the psychoanalyst who's also a Holocaust survivor, talks about how the ability to choose your own attitude is the last of the human freedoms. He says everything can be taken away from you except the ability to choose your own attitude. And so I agree with you. I don't think Reuben and Shimon are rebelling here per se. Like, I don't love that language, but they are looking down instead of up, right? They're missing the miracle because they are so focused on the negativity and the mud and the bricks. Like they can't see the difference because they're just looking at the ground. And so it's a reminder to me that we can't change our circumstances necessarily. I mean, sometimes you can, but we don't always have the ability to change our circumstances, but we do actually have the ability to make meaning out of our circumstances.
Absolutely. And yes, with Viktor Frankl, we have a lot about meaning making and choosing your own narrative, which I think as a storyteller and as somebody who loves all of these stories, I think that there is a lot of power in choosing your narrative. I think one of the reasons that I gravitate towards this one is that this doesn't mean that they were like this all the time, though I'm sure we all know people like that. This might have just been how they were in this moment. And we all have moments like that, even if we try not to be like that. So yes, so Vicky says that it was also familiar to them, the mud. So it's like this was sort of the only thing they could process. They might have just been overwhelmed. Um, and Dennis is saying people see problems in other people that they don't see in themselves. I'm sure Reuven and Shimon did not see themselves as rebellious or ungrateful. And Aiko says, could the abundance of mud be seen as a sort of positive? Having an abundance of mud for bricks for them to build homes that they themselves own instead of building them for someone else. Right, because it's even though they're talking about mud, they're also talking about this. Yes, I do like that as a silver lining. They're also talking about something they have in abundance, because right now they don't really have a lot. And there's a lot of uncertainty, but they're like, they start out with, in Egypt we have mud and now we have mud. So that seems sort of like a, my toes are feeling squishy. But then they say it's for making bricks. And while they're probably thinking, oh, we're going to have to make bricks here too, you could also see it as this time when we're making bricks, it's going to be different because it's going to be for our homes. I don't think they're quite there yet, but that is a wonderful understanding of that text. All right, so in contrast to that, what we have, so this is our Torah text. We have that everybody else, and presumably these folks too, because this text takes place during the crossing of the sea, and the rest of it what we're going to look at takes place after. So after the sea closes in on the Egyptians, Moses leads the people in singing, and there's this beautiful poem that in the Torah looks sort of like ocean waves. And then we see that after the whole poem is recited, then Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her in dance with timbrels. And Miriam chanted for them, "Sing to the Eternal, for God has triumphed gloriously. Horse and driver God has hurled into the sea." That's the first line of the poem that Moses had been singing in the sort of the section before. Okay, so looking at this text about Miriam, what do we notice? What do we wonder? What surprises us? What question might we have? Or what question, if you were an ancient rabbi, what question might you have looking at this text? Since I know some of you are seasoned in studying with La Sok. So you can either type in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, Bob.
Some say that Miriam was the unattributed author of the entire song.
Yeah.
And this was just a little way of giving her a bit of credit in the text.
Right. So so that's sort of a good question. Like, who wrote this song? Micah says, why is she called Aaron's sister? We're not going to get to that today, but there's a beautiful Midrash about why she's called Aaron's sister. What else might we be wondering if we're looking at this text with sort of a rabbinic mindset? Is there anything here? I'm thinking of the old song of like, one of these things is not like the other. If we're leaving Egypt in haste, is there anything that's sort of out of place in this scene? Yes, Dennis.
Of all the things they could have packed with them leaving in haste, why timbrels?
Right.
How did they know they would need them?
Right. Why would they pack timbrels? How do they know that they're going to need them? And I'm going to show you what the rabbi's answer is, which is one of my favorite midrashim. But first, I want to see what answers we might have. Why? So we have this story that we grew up with as children, that we don't even have time to bake bread, that we're putting dough on a bowl on our back, and it's baking in the sun while we're running. And we eat the Paschal lamb offering with our sandals on our feet because we're about to run, basically. But somehow we pack a timbrel. So Vicky says both Miriam's excitement and then cheering for the horse and drivers hurling into the sea. Bob says women always travel with timbrels. Okay, that's interesting. Men are told what to wear. Oh, okay. Yeah, so now we have like a little bit of a gendered thing that, what women carry with them all the time. I don't know what the equivalent would be today, but that the women are always carrying timbrels. And Micah says they had faith that things would work out. Yes. So yes, they had faith that things would work out. It is an act of faith to pack a timbrel, but why specifically a timbrel? What does why not party hats and streamers and why not why not any of those things? So it makes Vicky says it makes a noise. Carol, you raised your hand. You want to unmute?
That was the major instrument of the entire area of the world at that point in time. Very, very similar to my frame drum, except
yes, you have a frame drum. So we actually have a timbrel with us today.
Cymbals. So that was a standard piece of, all and primarily it was an instrument that women used.
Yeah.
All over that area of the world at that period of time. So that I don't find it unusual at all that they had them with them.
Right. So it was a common instrument. Vicky adds that it can be carried easily. Nina says it requires action by the user because you have to play the timbrel. And I like what Micah says. They saw themselves as thought leaders. They were planning to lead the Israelites in celebration when they were finally free. So we see in here some foresight and leadership in that. In this packing of the timbrel is that, in this moment, we're going to be in charge. Okay, so let's take a look at what Rabbi Ishmael has to say. Okay, the timbrel in her hand. Whence did they have timbrels and dance instruments in the desert? Being tzaddikim, righteous people, and knowing for certainty that the Holy One, blessed be God, would perform miracles and mighty acts for them when they left Egypt, they readied themselves and dance instruments they readied timbrels and dance instruments for themselves. And Miriam answered them, sing to the Eternal, for God is exalted over all the exalted. Horse and rider God cast into the sea. Scripture hereby apprises us that just as Moses chanted the song to the men, so did Miriam chant song to the women. So Bob says women always sing after a battle. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is why do you think that is? Why sing? Why dance? Why not, again, why not? I know that confetti hasn't been invented yet, but why not throw confetti? Why not, I'm trying to think of other things, but why not bake a cake? Let's just sort of think on that question as we move forward. So do we like Rabbi Ishmael's answer? It seems like it's in line with a lot of what we've been saying. Singing is verbal and has melody using voices. Yes, Vicky. Bob says, same as cutting down the net. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Bob. You're muted. Still muted. All right. Well, we'll come back to it. There you are.
At a basketball game, it's a celebration.
Oh, yes. You've chosen the wrong rabbi to use that joke with. I have no idea what we do when we win a basketball game.
That's not a joke.
Oh, it's not a joke. Oh, right. So yeah. So it's another act of celebration might be cutting down the net. Vicky says she knew that one. Oh, that's wonderful. So yeah. So there's all these different acts of celebration, and for me as a creative person, I'm sort of interested in this idea that music was the chosen mode. Music and dance was the chosen mode of giving thanks and of celebrating a miracle in this moment. So Rick says they're celebrating their warriors being home again, celebrating the relaxation of tension and conflict, and other actions along these lines. So we have so in that way it's sort of like a catharsis. It's like a relief, an outpouring. I think we do it for a lot of different emotions, but here it's gratitude. That, I'm sure that there are other people that when they're sad, you blast a song really loud, or when you're happy and getting ready to go to a party, you might blast a song really loud. Like it sort of covers a range of emotions. Oh, so it's like we made it to try to get it grateful to get across. That's what Vicky is saying. Okay, so I just wanted to throw in just a little tiny, yes, the blasting a song in the car, a little bit of Heschel. There is a built-in sense of indebtedness in the consciousness of man, an awareness of owing gratitude, of being called upon at certain moments to reciprocate, to answer, to live in a way which is compatible with the grandeur and mystery of living. And I love this idea, and I love this idea sort of in pairing with this text because it is saying, so Heschel is saying, when things like this happen, we need to respond. But when you pair it with this text, it's specifically, when things like this happen, we have to respond with music. We have to respond with creative expression. Yes, so I'm gonna unshare this 1 second. Hang on. So what I wanted to share with you in our last few minutes before I take questions, a couple of years ago, I participated in a sermon slam, which is similar to a story slam, but more religious in nature. And the theme was beauty. And once again, I already, and this was 6 years ago, was already fixated on this midrash, and actually started working on something that later became one of the chapters in this book. So if you're interested in midrash on the timbrels specifically, you can find it in Maybe It Happened This Way. But here's what I wanted to share with you. There was a symphony orchestra in the Warsaw Ghetto. In the Terezin concentration camp, children wrote poetry while their mothers wrote a cookbook of recipes they could no longer make in their homes. Even in Auschwitz, one woman produced 22 drawings depicting both her wildest fantasies and the horrific images in front of her. For me, this is not surprising, because for me, this means two things. First, that the need for beauty is so strong that we will seek it out even as we struggle to meet our basic needs. Second, that the impulse to create beauty is so strong that we will pursue it even in the darkest places and times. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel tells us that majesty and mystery of the world is so great that it requires a response from humans. For him, that response was prayer and activism. For many, that response is to create. And this impulse goes all the way back to the Exodus from Egypt. When the Israelites finally crossed the Red Sea to freedom, they burst out in song. Of course, that's what they do. They had just seen a miracle. Mere words of gratitude would not have sufficed. But then something really bizarre happens. Miriam begins to lead the women in song with dancing and timbrels. A timbrel is a hand drum, animal skin stretched over a wood frame. Song and dance, that doesn't require much forethought, though clearly they had to learn this song or compose this song so they could share it. But timbrels, how did they have the wherewithal to pack them, even when they didn't have time to bake bread? In one of my favorite midrashim, Rabbi Yishmael says that the women of Israel were so confident that a miracle would occur that they packed their timbrels in anticipation of the celebration. It was a sign of their deep faith in God and their hope for the future. But that still leaves me with one nagging question. Where did they get the timbrels in the first place? So I have a couple of theories. My first is that the women were so confident that redemption was imminent that they started crafting timbrels in secret while they were still enslaved. Another theory is that the women were so faithful that they kept their timbrels from before they were slaves, some 400 years, passing them down from generation to generation in hopes that they would one day use them to celebrate their freedom. But my favorite theory, what I truly want to believe at this moment, and what I ended up imagining in this book, is that the women were making use of their timbrels throughout their time in Egypt, even when they were slaves. Even when their bodies ached from long days of gathering straw and making bricks, birthing babies and raising children, they would gather in the evenings to make music and dance by the light of the full moon. Even as their spirits were crushed by cruel taskmasters and vile decrees against them, Even then, they gathered to make something beautiful out of what little they had. At a time when they should have been too tired and dispirited to move at all, they would take up their hand drums and dance and sing with defiance, with hope, and once in a while with genuine joy. This was their response to the world, to the majesty and the mystery. Because really, what else could they do? How else would they survive 400 years without making music, without throwing their bodies into dance? The need for beauty is so strong that we will seek it out even as we struggle to meet our basic needs. And the impulse to create beauty is so strong that we will pursue it even in the darkest places. And so I ask you, what instruments of beauty are you carrying with you right now? Where and how will you seek out beauty in our world today? And what beauty will you create yourself? So that leads me into a couple of wrap-up questions. When has music or creativity helped you to express joy or gratitude? Or on the flip side, when has it sustained you through dark and difficult times? So when has music or creativity helped you to express your feelings, whether it's sort of at that peak moment or at that in a difficult time? So Aiko says this reminds me a lot of the Jews keeping the "We Will Dance Again" movement that came after October 7th. Yes, since many of those people were killed when they were at a music festival, there was a sense that it was very important to keep dancing, to keep singing. All right, Carol.
I have always sung ever since I was in grade school, but I picked up that drum approximately 3 months ago.
Ooh.
I started drumming because I needed something more, and it works.
That's wonderful.
I take lessons online.
Yeah, that's really wonderful to be able to have that mode of expression. Yes. So, what else, creativity or otherwise, is something that gives you hope in dark or difficult times? What are your coping mechanisms? What are your outlets? So we have this drum is one of them. Yes, Bob.
Community is so important, and this is an important part of it. This SOAP group and other Torah study groups, things of that nature. It really helps me feel good about being a Jew.
Yeah, so building community, that is something that we do create both in joyful times and in difficult times. Vicky says, even in the deepest of depressions, I needed to create, to write, to collage, to listen to music. Micah says, playing the piano is very sustaining for me. When I'm upset, I like to sit down and play. Eve says, baking gets me through the good and the hard times. Dennis says, sitting quietly with a cat on my lap and getting up to tutor bar and bat mitzvah students. Yes. I had a moment yesterday where I had my last appointment of the day was to meet with a bat mitzvah student, and I was having a rough time, and I was thinking, I'm not sure if I can do this. And then we started, and I was like, no, this is actually the best. This is the best part. Right. So that teaching and study, or even what we're doing right now, studying Torah, these are things that sustain us. Oh, Micah says Eve's baking sustains me too. Well, and that's also a good point, is that we have this impulse to create for ourselves, but also to share with others, and other people's creativity can sustain us as well, especially if you're thinking of all the songs that you bless in the car on the radio. Yes, and Vicky says talking with her grandkids. So I just wanted to and I've sort of titled this session, who would you be on the shores of the sea? Because I want us to acknowledge, we all have that Reuben and Shimon in us. We all have that like, oh, I'm in the mud and it's hot out and I don't know where we're going and I don't know what's happening. But we also hopefully have the timbrel in our backpack. So we hopefully have something with us to express joy, something with us to create something beautiful, even when we're going through something difficult. So I want to say thank you to everyone and wish everybody a Zisen Pesach, a sweet Passover, and a Chag Sameach.
Thank you to Rabbi Leah Berkowitz for this wonderful session. And thanks to everybody. This was very interactive. It's great to hear all of your thoughts as well. Next week, we are meeting. It will be Pesach, but it's after Seder's. And we have Rabbi Jeff Brown of Scarsdale Synagogue, who's a wonderful teacher as well. So I look forward to seeing you next week. And have a very Chag Sameach, a very happy Pesach, everyone.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Rabbi Streifer. Thank you, Lasso community.
Thank you.